There was this thing that happened to me back in the late 80s, and to this day, I don't have a good explanation for it. It was summer. Hot as hell, one of those dry heat waves where the air feels heavy and everything looks washed out from the sun. I was working at a ranch out in Oklahoma, just helping with whatever needed doing. Fixing fences, tending to horses, that kind of thing. It was late afternoon when I started heading back to the main house. Long dirt road, nothing but fields and dry brush stretching for miles. I remember feeling good, just enjoying the quiet, the sound of cicadas buzzing. At some point, I noticed three people walking toward me down the road. One taller, two shorter. My first thought was that it was some rancher and his kids. That made sense. People around here walked the road sometimes. I didn't recognize them, but I didn't think much of it. Just kept walking. Then they got closer. Something was off. The two shorter figures weren't kids. They were nearly as tall as the one in the middle. And their bodies? There was something wrong with how they looked under their clothes. They were wearing these loose, grayish outfits, almost like old-timey dusters, and they hung in a way that didn't make sense. Like their bodies were wider at the bottom, tapering up toward their heads. The way they moved was even stranger. I couldn't see their feet. It was like they were just gliding forward. I wasn't scared at first, just confused. Kept telling myself I was imagining it, that the heat was messing with my head, but then I saw their faces. Pale. Too pale. Like paper. No color, no sweat, nothing. And the eyes. Big. Black. Too still. Not blinking. Just staring straight ahead. My stomach dropped. I knew, instinctively, that I was looking at something I shouldn't be seeing. I don't know how, but I knew. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me not to run. Running felt like the worst thing I could do, so I forced myself to keep walking, aiming for a side trail a few yards ahead. If I could just get off the main road, let them pass, maybe they'd ignore me. I could barely move. My legs felt like they were wading through mud, slow and heavy. Every time I looked at them, my brain tried to tell me they were just people, but my gut knew better. They weren't, and I still couldn't see their feet. I reached the side trail and turned onto it, careful, measured. Didn't look back at them directly, just watched from the corner of my eye. They didn't react. Just kept moving. The way their bodies swayed was wrong, like their heads were too still while the lower halves shifted slightly with each step. I held my breath until they passed. I walked faster, didn't run, just fast enough to put distance between me and them. And then, when I was far enough away, I ran, all the way back to the house. Later, I found out I wasn't the only one who saw them. A couple of ranch hands mentioned some weird-looking folks on the road that evening. One of them, a tough old guy who didn't spook easy, said he took one look and turned the other way. Wouldn't say why. Just muttered something about not liking the way they moved. Nobody ever figured out who they were. No one in town knew them. No one ever saw them again. They were just passing through. I still think about them sometimes. I don't know what they were, but I know they weren't people. And whatever they were, I'm just glad they didn't stop.